Fall is in the air. Well, kind of, sort of. But I will say that the 90-degree weather certainly feels a whole heck of a lot better than the 98-degree weather that we had last month. October is prime planting season, and up until this point we've been doing a lot of seed starting for fall, but it's all been in trays and protected locations. October is that glorious month when we finally actually get to put things into the garden beds and containers. So I am going to be sharing 6 different crops with you that you are able to start in the month of October so that you can get your fall bounty started. One of my now favorite crops to sow is something that totally took me by surprise. It's an herb, and it's something that I felt had a very pungent flavor. And I was doing this class with school children, preschoolers, and we were planting companion plants into the garden. So I brought in a handful of herbs and different things to plant. And the one that surprised me the most was the favorite crop. They stripped it down to the stem every single time the smallest little leaf would grow. And that is fennel. You wouldn't think it, but the sweet licorice flavor is really appealing to children. It's medicinal if you have a tummy ache, that kind of thing, you can eat it. And then it's also used in culinary cooking. You can make beautiful salads with it. I've included it in different soups. It's really versatile and incredibly easy to grow. Almost no pest pressure. So in my book, this is something that I now plant in my garden every single year, and I think you'll enjoy it too. So I know I was just saying that this is the time of year where we actually just get to put everything into the garden, and a lot of the seeds that I'm sharing are, but this one in particular is one I would still recommend planting into trays. Not because it needs additional protection from rain or heat or anything like that, but because this is one that needs light to germinate, which means it's surface sown. So the seeds are microscopic, and if you were to plant them directly into the garden, they need the light, they can't be buried, but then they just kind of get washed out with everything else. So I find that you get much better germination rate starting sweet alyssum in trays. Now this is something that I love to plant every single year because it is one of the few flowers that will bloom throughout the entire winter. There's other things like snapdragons and nasturtiums, depending on where you are in the state, that can do it, but this one is cold hardy, so even my North Florida friends can easily plant this and have blooms over the winter months. The nice small flower structure is also very appealing to parasitic wasps. And so I like to interplant this with my strawberries. It looks beautiful, and the greenstalk draping out over there, intermingling with the strawberries, draws in those beneficial insects. It's just a very nice addition to the garden. Although it is not edible, it is, in my opinion, a must plant every single year. I really love the Greenstalk vertical gardens for leafy greens. It's what I grow all of my lettuces, different herbs, obviously like strawberries and stuff like that. To me, these really shine for those leafy greens. And one of the first leafy greens of the season tends to be arugula. Now it does prefer, generally speaking, cooler weather, but I find that it's just a little bit more tolerant of that curb season, especially when it's new growth, when it's a flush of new leaves. If it were an older plant, it might not handle the heat so well, but when you first seed it, it does fantastic. This is one that you can direct seed into a Greenstalk, your raised beds, wherever. It's very hardy plant. You can also start it as a transplant as well to get a jump on the season. We have some started so that I can now plant it, and I'll be harvesting my first arugula salad probably within the next 1 to 2 weeks. This is a very fast growing crop and a great way to get that early win on your seasonal harvests. Root vegetables are a well-loved crop, and nearly every vegetable garden will find a little space to tuck in some carrots or turnips or beets or radishes. But there's this old saying in the gardening world: a good gardener never goes out into the garden without a packet of radishes in his or her pocket. And that is because radishes in particular are such an easy to grow crop that it's kind of silly not to put them everywhere. Breakfast radishes in particular are known for being incredibly fast to produce, anywhere from 21 days, so 3 weeks to 4 weeks, and you have your harvest. That is why so many farmers and gardeners will take radishes out into the garden and fields with them, because they can easily get in a round of radishes, harvest them just as the other crops are filling in and taking up that space. So it's a wonderful companion plant, a nice succession planting plant. But the variety that I'm featuring today is actually not a breakfast radish. It is a daikon type radish, which means it is a little bit slower growing, but you can still tuck it in just about anywhere. They don't need a heck of a lot of room, and they do really well planted in between other crops or around them. I particularly like the watermelon radish, also known as Masato Rose, because it is really versatile. So the breakfast radishes, they're small, they're fast growing, they taste great in salads, or if you like it, my cousin always does like salt on hers and she eats them raw, so did my grandma. But the daikon radishes can be a little bit tougher. Typically they need to be in like a kimchi or grated into like a coleslaw or salad. This one can go either way. So I'll slice this thin, throw it into my salads that I serve, but you can also use it as that heartier green. I've used it in my kimchis and all of that stuff. So not only is it beautiful, but it's very versatile. Do keep in mind though that if you're planting the daikon radishes, they do take a little bit longer to mature, so you will need to allow that time into your garden plans. Brassicas, also known as cruciferous vegetables, are another mainstay in many gardens. It's a very, very diverse group of crops, everything from kohlrabi to broccoli to kale, cabbage, cauliflower. All of those technically fall into the same plant family. They're just selected for different purposes. One in particular, though, is quite sensitive to not having cool weather. Broccoli, for example, or kale can be a little bit more flexible. They prefer the cool. They do best in cool climate. But if we have a little bit of a warm up, or if we're heading into the spring months and things are getting warmer, they can handle that pressure. Cauliflower, however, does not. And that is why I always plant cauliflower in the fall months, so that I'm able to harvest the plants before temperatures start to get a little wonky in our late winter, early spring. Now, cauliflower is an interesting one because not only is it quite sensitive to that cold, but it also has the curd. That's the white part that we see. And if the leaves don't cover the curd, you end up with this like off, funny looking color. It's still edible, just not as traditional or appealing. And so a self-blanching variety means that the leaves are going to naturally be inclined to kind of fold over the curd, the center part that we're going to harvest to eat, on its own. Some assistance can be helpful. If you have a rubber band, you can throw it around the top of the leaves once they kind of start to curl in on themselves. But this self-blanching snowball is my favorite, and it's the one that I plant every single season. We have so much potential here in Florida for growing amazing food most of the year, if not the entire year round. But there are a few limitations. There are certain crops that just don't do what they do elsewhere in the country. And onions happen to be one of those. We don't do great storage onions here, where you can cure them and keep them for the rest of the year when we're not actively growing and harvesting them. And that's a big limitation, especially if you're a small-scale homesteader or somebody who is trying to grow more of your own food. So instead of growing the traditional onions, which you can still do, you do need to plant short day onions though. That's a really important factor if you are trying to do the traditional bulbing onion, because we're going to be growing it in the winter months when the days are shorter. What happens is it's triggered by daylight as to when it starts to fatten up that bulb. And if we are growing it in those short days and the days start to elongate, we need that light to trigger the bulb formation while the weather is still cool. Whereas most other varieties that you would grow elsewhere in the country are going to use the short days to trigger the bulbing. So we're kind of the opposite. Texas early grano is one of those short day onions, and I have successfully grown and harvested them, but I am very much an easy, low maintenance gardener, and I like to find substitutions that just make my job that much simpler. And that is why I like to plant bunching onions. You're not going to get that traditional huge single onion bulb like you would a traditional onion, but these are still ones that will produce almost shallot type onions where you can harvest a small bulb nearly year round. These are perennial. They don't bulb up quite as well in the summer heat, but they're going to continue growing for you year round. And this is going to be foolproof. Once you plant it, you have it. You harvest it as you need it, and you're good to go. So bulbing onions typically tend to do a lot better down here in October. It is not the time to actually start these from seed. It's too late in the season. If you wanted to start onions from seed, you would start them usually like in August, sometimes even July if you're up further in north. But at this point in October, it is time to plant onion sets or bulbs. Now, I got these from Cody Cove Farm. I can have a link down for you in the notes. You can sometimes find them at certain nurseries or potentially even big box stores, although I caution against that in many cases. Finding a local supplier is always going to be much better suited to growing in our climate, typically healthier produce and bulbs. So definitely check them out if you're interested in picking up some onion sets. But these are going to be something that you can invest in once and have for years to come. So over the years, decades of experience, you kind of start to figure out the easy, the easy button. And there are times when you can supposedly like fight it and nurture these hard to grow crops along, spray them for pests, spray them for fungal issues, make sure they're sheltered enough, start them in trays, all these other things that just really add, in my personal opinion, a lot of work and anxiety and maybe a little bit less joy to the art of gardening and the task of gardening. And so over these years, I've really come to appreciate substitutions. When I can grow something like a loofah and eat it as a squash substitute, yet have to do nothing for pests or fungal issues, that's a win in my book. And so I have created this video next that shares some of my tried and true best success cases for easy substitutions on various vegetables here in Florida. So make sure to check that one out if you are a low maintenance gardener like myself.